what's their job, that other people should be doing their job. At least if they're telling other people to do their job, that they should ask them nicely.
Sometimes being bossy will have the opposite effect of what you're trying to get.
You're not supposed to use bossy anymore. Oh, well, you can if it's a man.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
good.
but you can't if it's a woman. Woo! That was a close one. You almost got into some seriously politically correct trouble. You got hauled off to politically correct prison and sentenced to life without the possibility of politically correct parole, Brian. That was a close one. So, yeah, we can call the governor bossy, but we could, if he was a woman, we would be in some serious heap doo-doo.
Would stern be okay?
Stern. No, bossy. We're going with bossy. I like bossy.
Okay.
I'm all for bossy. I'm not politically correct. I haven't picked up on that. I keep my finger in the stream just to make sure I know which way it's flowing. Please do your job. Well, I've got some comments about who did or didn't do their job. I also saw some comments and having a nice back and forth with Kate and Carl and Sue, the true leftist, out on the Alaska Dispatch News. Does it do any good, by the way, to discuss things with people who are on the left?
You got to keep trying until it does.
I would say generally it absolutely doesn't, but I will tell you that I believe that the silence will be deafening, because here's the one thing you don't want to do is argue with somebody else who has more facts than you and knows the process a little bit better than you, because then all of a sudden, all of your words, which are all just, oh, well, see, it's really just a foolishness on the other person's part, and then you tell them the truth, and then all of a sudden, oh, you're right, it's actually my side.
And there's a chance you could say something like, I've been arguing since before you were born.
Well, I'll tell you what, the silence is deafening. I will go through the comments that I gave. It's actually the title of the story is literally untrue. I mean, does the paper care anymore? I don't know about this. Pat Forgy, who's gone left and then he went further left, and I don't know whether he's completely fallen off the map, but I do have a question for you. Here is the title of this article, which we'll talk about during the show today. Also, Lynn Curry's piece about foul language being used in offices and anger management. I kind of like the approach that the business is taking here, and it's probably a lesson for everybody else. Here is the title of the story in the politics section. This is a newspaper. This is not a blog. These people have a constitutional authority. But generally, it's meant and intended that they should tell us the truth. Here is the title of it. Legislative recess officially ends with no budget. Whoops. Whoopsies. Actually, they passed a budget. Does he not know that they passed a budget?
They passed a budget.
They passed the budget. They passed the operating budget. They passed the capital budget. The budget has been passed. Pat, do you, and I don't think they care. Now, here's what he means to say. First, I want to stay on this just for one more sentence. I won't belabor this because it's obvious. Okay, Pat does not care whether or not he's not telling you the truth. They did pass a budget. The legislature has a constitutional requirement to pass a budget. They did so. The budget is passed. It is on the governor's desk. Do you hear that? How could they not have passed a budget if the actual bill is sitting on the governor's desk? Excuse me. How could they not have passed the budget? Pat Forgy, I know that you don't care. I know it doesn't make any difference. And all you're writing this for is for Sue and who is the other? Carl and Kate, who could care less along with you whether or not the title of it is true. I say this. Only one problem with this story's headline. The legislature did pass a budget. It is on the governor's desk. He needs to sign it, veto it, or allow it to become law without signature. Those are his three options. So the title of this story literally is untrue. It's complete falsehood. Do not believe this story. Now, what does the story mean? What the story doesn't like, and this is the most important thing because it gives us absolute hope, it gives us great pleasure to announce the following. The Republicans in the state House and Senate have learned that they are something. What is it? They are politicians and they need to play politics in the game of politics better than the other side. And do you know what this means? They've learned that. Oh my gosh. And you know what the Alaska Dispatch News cannot let them do? Because they know that the Republicans, they might lose. If they play the game of politics, they might still lose. But at least they got a chance to play. Here's what the Alaska Dispatch and Pat Forgy and all the rest of these guys down there don't like. They don't like an appropriate game of politics being played by the Republicans. They want the Republicans to roll over. They want them to give up. They want them to close shop. They want them to stop being conservatives. They want them to stop speaking. They want them to just spend the money. They want the taxes to start flowing. We're going to have a presentation coming up in Fairbanks in just a little while on something that they promised that they wouldn't do. And that's taxes before they talked about cuts. So we're talking about adding 100, maybe 150 million back into the budget. We've passed the budget, though. What will happen? Great news. This is great news, and it is important that we do go out and verbally correct Carl Aschenbrenner, Kate Areola, and Sue Cassens, who probably don't have the slightest clue that what they're saying is false. We correct them, and we hope for the best. The Glen Biegel Show, 569-1080, 357-5868. Happy Wednesday, folks. It's Wings Wednesday. Stay tuned. Mama. 15 minutes after the hour, Glen Biegel here on KON and KV, our sponsor for this hour of the program, A&A The Shop. If you're looking for some place to take care of your Subaru, yes, I know you love your Subaru, and it is the perfect car for our state. Seems like it could go anywhere. It's unstoppable. It's just as comfortable as can be. Nice power, but a great range, great gas mileage. Everything about them is fantastic, but they do occasionally need to be serviced. Actually, they need to be regularly serviced. So You need to get oil changed, and it checked out. 85-point inspection with every oil change, and you will not believe how cheap that oil change is. And they almost always have a $5 off coupon for their oil changes as well. 562-3919. And out in Eagle River, 696-2096, online at aatheshop.com. Make sure to go and visit them. 6 out of the last 12 years, best shop in Anchorage, Alaska's premier independent Subaru service center. And they only deal with Subarus. Unfortunately, if you do not have one, then you'll have to find another place. But if you have a Subaru, that's just a place to take it. You're listening again to the Glen Biegel Show, 569-1083, 575-5868. Does this showdown between the Republicans and the Democrats, there are distinct areas of the budget, by the way, and I want to talk about Governor Bill Walker. Please do your job. He's talking to one group specifically, and it is chutzpah because he didn't do his job. And then, because he promised us, right? He said he was going to cut the government. Now, I heard 25%, but somebody else said 16%. So let's just go with 16. He did not cut the government 16%. He has not identified what areas of his administration, what areas of government will be cut to reduce our government by 16%. He has not done his job, his promises over and over during the election. I will establish this. No one could tell who was more conservative, Sean Parnell or Bill Walker. But very many rational people thought Bill Walker was the more conservative of the two. Very many people. He talked more conservative, even though he was going to partner up with the Democrats in the end. He talked a more conservative game. He had more specifics on what it was or he wasn't going to do. Right? He was on record. The man is on record. So then he comes out and says, excuse me, here's what he's really saying. Please do my job without me, by the way. The 1,950 people I can appoint, the 25,000 employees that I have, the understanding and knowledge about what services I want to protect, what services I want to modernize, what services I want to combine, I'm not going to tell you. I want you to do my job. How are they supposed to do that? Now, the other group he's talking to, other than trying to cover for himself, are the Democrats. Please do your job. All they say is, well, we want more money or we're not going to let you go into deficit spending. I'm sorry, we're, $3.2 billion into deficit spending? You want another $150 million? What the heck are you? Are we going to put up with this? Is this what Alaskans want? You're going to have to pay every dime of that $150 million. Actually, the $150 million translates into probably $1 billion or $1.5 billion. That's how important this $150 million is. Why is that? If you just take $150 million added every year, next year they'll add $150 million onto whatever they're going to cut. Then the next year, that's $600 million. But that's not the truth of it. What this cut is about, what this reduction in government is about, is establishing that one important, probably the most important thing in your life. And I'm going to bring this down to the level at which we spend money. Family budget. You say, we got to cut our internet. Now, you may not cut it out altogether, but you may say, well, we're just going to have to go with a cheaper option. And your kids will go, no way. I can't have a slower internet. I can't have less data usage. I have to have the higher level of data. I have to. My whole life depends on it. I will go crazy. I will lose my mind. I will lose friends because of this. You will put me into a poorhouse. I will not be able to get a job if I don't have, well, whatever it is. So they come up with all these reasons. None of them make sense. What do you establish by getting a slower internet and then enforcing the rules that, no, we're out of data? You guys were downloading 4 movies at a time, and guess what? We're actually going to have to sit in the same room in order to watch a movie, maybe once a week. The other 6 days we'll be able to sit in 4 different rooms and download 4 movies at a time, but once a week. That's our lower data limit. What does it establish? It changes behavior. When you have less money, when you have less internet, when you have less, you change your behavior. But more importantly, and most importantly, it establishes, and I'm smiling here, it establishes that you can. It establishes that the world doesn't come to an end, that you didn't lose your job and you didn't lose your friends and you didn't lose, you didn't lose your sanity. You didn't lose. You didn't lose. You actually can adapt. Human beings are almost infinitely adaptable. Almost. Now, bureaucracies are not almost infinitely adaptable. Our business, right, our free market is almost infinitely adaptable. Government, not so much. And when you have a monopoly that says, look, I'm entitled to all this tax money, you'll just give it to me. And even if I don't produce well, we had something come out just yesterday. Alaska is at the bottom of, or near the bottom of high school graduation rates. Average for the country, 81%. Average for Alaska, 71%. That's not good. That stinks. And we're, I think, second or third highest in the country for expenditures. Maybe they're not related. But if you have bureaucracies are very hard to change. The free market, you say, oh, well, I need this new service. Oh, okay, well, we'll figure out how to do that. I want to create Uber. Here you go. I want to, right? The ability for the free market to change almost instantaneous and dramatically. It could do just about everything. So it's very, very important. I'm establishing here that this $150 million, right? The Democrats want to spend $150 million more. That's when they stopped negotiating. The governor comes back and says, well, I'll revise my budget. I just want $100 million more. Really? Well, thanks for not doing your job. Didn't you promise to do your job? Didn't you say you were going to help us cut the budget? Didn't you say you were going to give us priorities? That hasn't happened. So now we look at the real rub. And this is family politics. And if we don't back up the legislators right now, by the way, this false story headline, legislative recess officially ends with no budget, false. Pat Forgy doesn't care. And talk of a shutdown. Why is there a budget? Why can they call it a budget? I want people to realize why they can call this a budget. Because it quite literally is a budget, and you can call it a budget. You don't know that you're out of money. There's only an estimate that you're going to be out of money. What happens if the price of oil goes up to $130 a barrel? No, seriously. If tomorrow the price of oil went up to $130 a barrel, then what would happen? We'd have a balanced budget. They have passed the budget. They don't know that they believe that it's not going to be balanced. They believe that they will have to deficit spend. But they're willing to put that off because they want time to explain to the public. Now, that is playing politics. And that is what the Republicans have been trying to do for a long period of time. And finally, they have the strength to do it. Finally, the Republicans have the strength to play politics in a political situation. The politics are this, and it's very important. And hopefully they will be successful in this. And I think they will be. Because if they're not successful in this, they know that they're going to be letting the state down. That will have a massive income tax and on and on and on. So they're playing politics with this. Looks like this. They pass a budget that eventually will run out of money. When it gets close to the point of running out of money, they will have gone out to their constituencies. They will have gone to local meetings. They will have gone on local talk shows. They will have written pieces in the paper. They will have posted on Facebook. They will have made their case. Folks, if we have to rely on Democrats, they're going to require $150 million more dollars out of us. We cannot afford that. We cannot afford the Democrats because you're going to have to pay every single dime of that in an income tax when the time comes. We have to cut this money, and we have to cut it now. Next year, we have to cut more. The year after that, we have to cut more. The year after that, we have to cut more. So they're going to come home and make the political argument. This $150 million in cuts, and the governor is actually not involved here, by the way, and that's why another thing which is very misleading about this story, because they're acting like the Republicans in the House are negotiating with the governor. They're not. The Republicans in the House are negotiating with the Democrats in the House from which they need some votes in order to get into the constitutional budget reserve. You say, well, but I thought they had a majority. Yes, but they need 3/4 to spend out of the constitutional budget reserve. When was the last offer that the Democrats made? $150 million ago. So they're not negotiating with the governor. The governor's not part of the legislative process. He vetoes. He actually offers a budget. Then after the legislature passes it, he vetoes it, or he signs it, or he allows it to become law without a signature. Those are his three options. They've passed a budget. He says he doesn't like it. He's spoken out against it. He's going to go to Fairbanks, I think, next month and talk about how he wants taxes now. How he wants taxes now. We're way far away from not being the highest per capita spending state. Way far away. And if we continue to spend the money we have right now, we're going to favor people who don't have jobs staying in Alaska and disfavor people who do have jobs staying in Alaska. And I don't like the sound of that because that sounds like my kids are going to live somewhere else. And this is a great place. All right. So that's the details of this. Lots of other news going on out there. Hey, Governor, I'm going to come back at you, by the way, before I leave it. Please do your job. I'll just throw your words right back at you. You promised it. Tell us where the 16% in government cuts are. I want to see a government that's 16% smaller. Just like you said, tell us what you're going to defend. And you know what? Maybe the legislature will say, well, we'll go for the 16% cuts in 1 year rather than I think they ended up with like 1 or 2% cuts across the entire budget outside of the Capitol. Democrats plan a town hall meeting. Oh, this would be so much fun. Yeah, what you ought to do is go and say, every person who asks for something, they're not asking from the oil companies anymore. They're going to get you. They're going to increase your property tax. They're going to increase your income tax. They're going to put a sales tax on you. Just be ready for that. And that's the mindset you need for every person who supports bigamy. Big gimme. Big gimme. The gimme state. Gimme. Hey, I need some cash. Give me some state cash. So I'm looking forward to this Democrat town hall meeting because I'm going to go and add up all of the nice to haves that these people want out of my family budget. And state budget woes could cut into Southeast timber sales. You know, this is the sad reality of it. If we prioritize welfare spending over job fair spending, boy, are we going down the wrong path. You're listening to The Glen Biegel Show, 28 minutes after the hour. KOAN, KVNT. Mike Dingman coming up. 25 minutes before the hour, Glen Biegel Show. Still waiting for some more details to flow in on the investigation of the 4 deaths in South Anchorage. And that is a lot of people dying all in one residence. And a family member came in, found the 4 people non-responsive, called the police, and they are investigating. It's in a 4-plex down near Taku Lake, north of the Diamond Center. So we'll wait and see if we get any more details on that. You're listening to the Glen Biegel Show. We were expecting Dingman, but it turns out that he had and he gets these occasionally. I think he gets headaches or something, which is a terrible. It's a terrible malady. I can't stand them. Whenever I get a headache, by the way, I know that I'm going to be physically ill. Like
I've seen that happen to you, actually. When we were doing the mornings, you got felt a couple times you didn't feel that good there.
Yeah. Well, and headaches are so awful because you can't really control them. They're in control of you. And since your brain is essential to just about everything I do, I can't overcome them. And it's, I mean, if you've got a broken leg, you just deal with the broken leg. The broken leg is there. You still have your hands or whatever. If you had a broken hand, you could still probably dictate or at least use your other hand. You can do something. They have video games I'm sure you could play with your, one-handed or, something. But when you got a headache, nothing solves that. Everything's miserable. I really feel bad for Mike Dingman.
I sent back an email just saying
we hear some good news there. Dan Cuddy, longtime head of First National Bank Alaska, and this is the father, dies at age 94. So Dave Cuddy, his son, was, you may not know this, Brian, but Dave Cuddy and his wife, Kathy, were some people who were very influential to me when I was younger in the world of politics.
When I went to Diamond High School, one of my teachers' name was Mrs. Cuddy, and I can't remember which one she was married to, but it was one of the family.
One of the family members?
Yep. She taught astronomy.
Huh. Well, it's this is a small town.
Yeah, it is.
I think that's the reality of the situation. Is we live in this teeny tiny little village.
I know.
It happens to have 300,000 people. There you go. A lot of people know me. You don't think you know me. You don't know me.
That's right.
How about that? Strange Matt Sue news here. Senior Center in Houston suddenly shuts its doors. And I don't know what will happen over time. I wonder whether this is sort of the harbinger of new things to come. A facility that served as a hub for seniors in the Alaska community of Houston since the late 1980s shut its doors this week without notifying state officials as required. Why do you have to officials in order to shut your doors? Mid-Valley Senior Center also provided home meal delivery services. Well, I guess they should have done it anyway. I mean, just as a courtesy. That's very strange.
Well, if you're licensed by the state and you're housing people, I would think they would want a chance to.
Well,
help.
Let's see whether they house people. I don't know. So they had meal delivery services to dozens of seniors, which that could obviously cause a real problem. In a spread out but growing community along the Parks Highway between Wasilla and Willow, the nonprofit that operates the center announced the closure with a Facebook post Tuesday morning. It is with great sorrow and a heavy heart we have to tell you that the Mid-Valley Senior Center has closed its doors to the building, the post stated. It goes on to say that the current board of directors that started a little more than 2.5 years ago took on much more than was realized and recently discovered that the problem was much greater than we knew. We could not turn it around fast enough. The center was spending more than it was bringing in, according to officers there. Don Hodgins, 73, discovered the center was closed only after he showed up for lunch. 73-year-old Vietnam vet. He came about every day. Sounds pretty sad, and I don't know whether or not it's probably a nonprofit, I would imagine. And but you'd think after 2.5 years, it sounds like somebody was not really providing accurate accounting information.
That happens in Big Lake.
That's kind of where my mind was going here. Actually, it happens a lot all over the place.
Right.
You see this in native corporations.
Yeah.
And remember, this was a crazy story, and it was in the paper a little while ago. But the supposed head of a native corporation called up the CFO of a corporation, a native corporation, and then a lawyer called following up that call, asking for, I thought it was either 2.1 or 3.8 million dollars to be transferred to an offshore account.
Right.
So to which the CFO says, "Okay, why
Well,
not? Why the heck not? That sounds normal. Are you sure you just need 2.1 million or 3.8? Why don't we go for 10? I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, this money's not doing anything else."
he said he was the president.
He said it was a president. The guy was a lawyer, and I was pretty sure that he was because he sounded very lawyerly. Reading to you from paragraph 4, subchapter 8.
They said, if you just cash this check, we'll give you some back.
It clearly states that if the head of the organization is on a weekend gambling binge, that you should definitely transfer money to an offshore account so that he can access that. I don't know. I mean, that's crazy. So and also up in north of Fairbanks, there's a whole bunch of Fairbanks native corporations, and they're all basically, it's just a big piggy bank. Whoever's running it is handing out cash, and I don't mean to be flippant or mean or say things out of hand. I've been told by people who are members of these organizations that it really is the Wild West. They are kind of just making it up as they go along, and then they make the accounting. They'll give out things like snow machines to their friends. They will give out cars. They will give out trips. They'll, spend money on. They'll do all kinds of things which have nothing to do with corporate expenditures.
They even help with death benefits. A lot of times we would get, through the funeral home I worked at.
Oh, that's good.
But
are they legal? I guess that's the question. I don't mind if they do stuff as long as it's within the corporate requirements.
Yeah, I don't know. They'd fly the whole family in, and it would be a premium service, not just a regular.
Oh, well, that's
service,
fine.
like
Now,
the
see,
state.
all that stuff sounds like it is part of what they could do as long as it was accounted for properly.
Right.
Right. And I don't know that is necessarily a problem. What I have a difficulty with is you can't give a snow machine to a friend and then figure out why you did it after that. That's really not business. And the problem is that these corporations are not required to disclose anything. They don't have any disclosure requirements or very limited disclosure requirements. They don't do GAAP accounting, generally accepted accounting practices. So it's a little strange anyway. So if you are dependent on that Houston Senior Center and you're listening to the Glen Biegel Show here on KOAN, KVNT, make sure to keep track of that story. Apparently it has closed. So Dingman comes out with a zinger, and the zinger is pretty rough. And I essentially disagree with just about everything in it. Current and outgoing Anchorage Mayor Dan Sullivan will be remembered for vitriol and the bitterness that came from the eventual defeat of city labor ordinance known as AO 37. The dismantling of the Anchorage Police Department. Wow. And the generally poor manner in which he handled municipal employees. You know what my solution to that is, by the way? That we don't have municipal employees. No, really. I'm not kidding. We could privatize the fire department. We should privatize everything other than the police officers at the police force, every single function, from fixing their cars, the people doing dispatch work. I guess there are some privacy concerns, but frankly, maybe people don't know this. I might give you a little bit of a shock here. So if you're not ready for shocking information, we have people working for the government, for the military, who look at classified information all the time. It's called having a background check and a security clearance. Don't tell me that the people who are dispatching stuff can't do it because they need a security clearance. We do it all the time. I don't want that to be shocking to you, but hey, this is reality. This is real life. So that's my solution to and he did not handle them in a generally poor manner. That's just not true. Yes, the defeat of AO 37 is going to be a huge feather in the cap, and it was a big uplift to the labor unions. Really set them back. And you know why I feel personally responsible? Because I told him, and I told everybody on the radio, that AO 37 was a slam dunk. 3-year contracts, not 6-year contracts. Everybody agrees with that. Is there anybody other than Ethan Berkowitz and municipal labor organizations who don't agree that we shouldn't be passing a contract for the next 2 mayoral terms? Who could possibly support that? That's crazy. It resulted in us losing 50 or 60 officers. He did not dismantle the police force. Over the last 4 years, it's been level, and now we've actually started adding police officers to the police force. That doesn't sound like dismantling police force, huh? And we actually have the same number of officers as we had back in, around 2006. Well, that doesn't sound like a dismantling of the police force. There's 327, and we actually had 367 or 365 paid officers. That's not a dismantled police force. Dingman's really out on a limb here, and I think he's showing his true stripes, which is what I wanted to talk to him about. Hopefully he'll come in tomorrow. Not only was AO 37 bad policy, that is not true. It was good policy. Every single thing in it. Now, the one thing that they highlighted that they didn't like, that management got to decide the staffing and scheduling for the fire department. Can you tell me another city in which, I guess it's done in like some cities, but it's very rare. Most of the time, the scheduling and staffing is determined by management, not by the union heads and union bosses, because that results in too much overtime, and then that blows your budget all the time. You're listening to the Glen Biegel Show, 14 minutes before the hour, KOAN and KVNT. What do you think of this? What do you think of Dingman's article? Do you think this is fair to our mayor? 14 minutes before the hour. Stay tuned. Oh, yeah. 11 minutes before the hour. KOAN and KVNT, the Glen Biegel Show. I think we're getting closer to having podcasts, by the way, Brian, out on glenbiegel.com. Not quite there, but we will be. And any guests who are on the show, you will be able to get their full force of their comments. And the discussion betwixt us.
Well, and there's a couple of ways if you really wanted to figure it out to look and listen to them. I did post a couple links on the Glen Biegel Show Facebook today.
Good.
Of a couple of podcasts, and also SoundCloud or even YouTube. Type in the Glen Biegel Show.
Okay, so a number of different ways to get a hold of things, and we are trying to put smaller pieces of the show out there because we have a lot of groundbreaking news making.
I got the edit bay working at my house now. So.
Excellent. Brian Hoff there, that's, by the way, his. And if you're missing Bonnie, we're all missing Bonnie. And she decided, I think she had, it probably was her first major campaign season. And I got to tell you, they can be brutal. They can be exhausting. They can overwhelm you. They can overwhelm your family. It really does take a lot out of you. But I do have a feeling of this. I think Bonnie is going to be around, if not in body, she'll be around in spirit, and continue to influence Alaska politics. So I have a feeling that will be the case. She actually is going to fill out her final duty for the show, and she's going to host next Wednesday. If you tune in, and I have a few different people filling in for me across the weekend. So we're talking about the Dingman article, Mike Dingman, and he was going to come in. We were going to talk about this, and it's a pretty rough, it's a pretty harsh attack. And of course, people in this town see things from different viewpoints, see things from different angles. I believe AO 37 was great policy. It limited raises to CPI plus 1%. So if the CPI was 3%, you could only get a 4% raise. That's all you could give. It said that you could only sign 3-year contracts. It said that the bonuses, if you showed up to work on time for 7 years, you got a 10% bonus in your pay. And that you can't. Nobody out there gives bonuses for showing up on time regardless. If you got an unrelated degree to your profession, you got a pay increase. Nobody does these things. Everybody has to make decisions on whether or not this has improved your efficiency, whether it's created a better officer, a better fireman, a better clerk, a better whatever. You can't just give blanket things. Nobody does this anymore in any place other than the municipal government, in any place other than state government. And it doesn't make sense. And so it's time for these things to come to an end. AO 37 basically built these walls that Begich and his administration, and then Clayman had made it even worse, had broken through, done a whole bunch of things which had never been done before. One of the worst things, by the way, in the Begich contracts that doesn't get talked about, he said that you could not have competition, that the municipal employees did not have to justify their expenses. Well, that's not the way real life works. Every business has to justify their employees. Every business has to justify their costs. There's no group that's exempted other than police. No group. They have a private fire department, a volunteer fire department out in Eagle River. They have a part-time fire department out in the valley. And they're paid, I think, $17 or $20 an hour. Not, $155,000 a year paying benefits. Here, we have the most expensive fire department in the country. Well, these kinds of things are probably going to have to change, but they're probably not going to change for a while. So Dingman's article is written, I think, partially from the fact that Dan Sullivan lost AO 37. If he had won AO 37, this article would probably not have been written, or it would have been dramatically different. So here's the one thing, though, that I wanted to bring up, which I thought was noteworthy and really needs to have some comments about it. It brings up this AO 37 and says that it did not involve public employees. Here is the statement. Not only was AO 37 bad policy, I disagree with him on that. I already said that. It was handled very poorly. The Sullivan administration sprung this ordinance on the public with no warning, and it was crafted with no input from public employees it would have affected. They don't have the right to have say in the development process. And in fact, it's idiotic, stupid, and would be totally counterproductive to bring them in before you were ready to reveal it. Why? Because some things went in, some things went out. You discussed this with your people. You tried to figure out from people who had been in unions but weren't currently in unions. What do you think the unions will do with this? Is this a good way to govern the documents and the negotiating process on behalf of the city? Is this something we have to have? You don't just go out there and say, hey, we're thinking of putting these 10 things, 9 of which all got left out of the final bill. You don't do that. What you do is you craft the whole bill. When the bill is crafted, you bring it before the assembly. Then the public has input. And the labor unions have input just like everybody else. Did you know, by the way, that this ordinance had more public testimony than any previous ordinance in the history of our city? Did you know that? More than any other. This did not go through without consultation. It did not go through in the dark of night. And no one, I don't remember Begich ever bringing me in when he was negotiating with the unions on both sides of the table when he was headed out as mayor. No, he actually broke the law because he didn't tell the assembly how much the contracts were going to cost. And that was found in a report that he did break the law, but nobody wanted to prosecute him, which saddens me. I think Begich should have to face his accusers. So I think that was particularly unfair here. But that is a continual complaint. You're gonna pass a negotiating framework for our contracts, but you don't bring us in so that we can blow up the process before we can blow up the process at the assembly. Well, no, we don't do that because this mayor is very smart politically. So I disagree with Dingman's article from the very beginning, from the very title all the way to the bottom. Anchorage Mayor Sullivan let bad politics derail what would have been a good legacy. He has a good legacy. And it not would have been a good legacy. He lost a big battle, AO 37. They spent $1 million on it. The conservatives only spent about $40,000 on it, so they were outspent between 20 and 25 to 1, plus the unions outworked the conservatives. Of course, they had a lot more to lose, and unfortunately, that's the reality a lot of times. So that's Mike Dingman's article. When we come back, we've got a lot to cover. Alaska ranks near the bottom of high school graduation rates. The population growth in Alaska, it doesn't seem all that significant that we declined by 61 people. Unless, of course, you think that normally Alaska would grow between 2 and 3% per year. So I'll tell you the true number of people that are missing here from Alaska, the crime statistics, and so much more. I'd love to hear from you. 569-1080, 357-5868, one of the sponsors of the show, and somebody who's great at what they do, Earhart Roofing. The best in the business, Better Business Bureau Business of the Year. That includes hot dog stands and Costco's and everything across the entire state of Alaska. The Better Business Bureau Business of the Year for 2010. 345-5555. Earhart Roofing, the only platinum Corning warrantor in the entire state of Alaska for the last 3 years. They can give you an unlimited Corning warranty. And that is important, especially if you're a business and you need to make sure that everything is ship shape. Earhart Roofing. When you think roofing, think Earhart. EARHART. The Glen Biegel Show. Stay tuned. It's Wing Wednesday, folks. That means that the 45 minutes of this hour, we're going to be giving away a $20 gift certificate to Wings and Things, the corner of 36th and Arctic. And boy, if you've not had their wings, the best wings on planet Earth by far, I suggest the hot, extra saucy, and that will set you up with an absolute delight. 277-WING is their number, but we'll be giving away something for them later in the show. Lots to cover here with you, and I'd love to hear from you. 569-1080, 357-5868. What do you think about the city allowing pot displays at city facilities? Not even sure I know what that means. Let's see. City's trash collection, they're thinking about selling that. Should we be selling our trash collection? And they are going to allow the possession and display of marijuana in city facilities. Wow. Well, I guess the drug is legal, so maybe that's what they mean, that you won't be arrested if you bring marijuana into a city facility. Does that mean you could just smoke it in there too? Probably. You could just go ahead and smoke it. So the possession and display of marijuana, but you can't yet smoke it. I'd be surprised if they didn't treat secondhand marijuana smoke at least as harshly as secondhand smoke.
I think
tobacco.
The fine is less, actually.
I don't even know whether or not they're going to enforce any.
You know what's weird, though? When I
rules.
was growing up in Anchorage, going to school here, the police would bring in these displays with all the different drugs and all kinds of stuff. Show it to the kids.
I remember that. Yeah. You got to look at what cocaine looked like and heroin looked like and
some pills. Like, now you know what to look for.
Just in case you want to be bad.
No, just kidding.
Here's the way this all goes. And never been a big fan of mind altering drugs. I mean, how much more fun can a person have than what I'm having? That's my view. Plus it ends up changing you. There's no way to take drugs to try and change your life and not have it change you in the process. This is my view of the way alcohol works. 569-1080, 357-5868. People want to fool around and they don't want to be responsible for it, so they're going to drink alcohol until they can claim that they're not in charge of themselves, and so whatever happens just happens. And that's my guess as to why a lot of people find themselves in dangerous or iffy situations, or maybe saying, whoops, what did I do last night?
Who's shooting at me?
No, I'm not talking about shooting. I'm talking about most girls are, I mean, they're not trying to go out and, biblically know other people, but how should we refer to that, by the way? But, they know they're going to put themselves into a position that their standards are going to decline dramatically as the alcohol content of their blood increases. And basically, they'll end up doing something that they would never, ever, ever even allow themselves to do, some drag of humanity, which just happened to be in the middle of a bar while you were drinking there. And all of a sudden, he becomes, okay, sure, why not? I just don't think girls want to consider themselves to be personally responsible for that.
Well, that's one storyline. There's others.
Okay, so I got a text here. Somebody said, you're not allowed to smoke, Mary Jane, in city facilities, but trade shows with plants and growing equipment might be at the Denina.
Yeah, that's going to happen this weekend, I think.
Yeah, so that's
I wonder if you're allowed to eat it.
In candy?
Yeah, because the smoke is what's bothering people, right? The physical smoke.
Mm-hmm.
So
there wouldn't be any secondhand people. You do have to worry, though. Some people, I guess, have taken some edibles and they can heighten the amount of THC that's in edibles to the point where it actually becomes a somewhat dangerous drug.
Yeah, don't do anything like that if you don't know what you're doing.
Well, that's my but what do you think of my view of alcohol? That's why so many people drink it, because they know what's going to happen. They want it to happen, but they don't want to feel responsible for whatever the drag of humanity that they end up with is.
That's one way. I mean, some people maybe not going out to meet somebody. They just want to stay home and drink all night.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about specifically the girls who are finding
Yeah.
themselves at a bar.
That's how I met my wife. No, I'm just kidding.
It's a love story. Come on. That's great.
Some of those have nice endings and some of them don't.
Yeah. Well, no, I would say most of them probably don't. You know, the difficulty for marriage is it's just really hard. Yeah, think about it. I mean, the kinds of things that people get wrapped around the axle about. First of all, most people are prideful, and that's part of our nature as human beings, and you can't be. What is pride? Pride means I don't have to live by the rules that I set because I'm more important. I've got this pride. I'm more important than these rules. And marriage requires rules, and you have to live by the rules. And it requires humility. So you can't have pride and you have to have humility, but you have to have it all the time. I always describe it like it's a bucking bronco ride where both the horse and the rider have to hold on to each other. And if the horse lets go, and I'm not saying who's the horse. I mean, I don't want to carry and who's the rider. But if either the horse or the rider let go, you know, that both spouses have to hold on to each other with all their might because the world is trying to break you apart, you know, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes on in life and in your financial situation and your spiritual situation and just your friends, your parents, all these different things are trying to break you apart. And if you don't hold on to each other with all your might, you know, virtually all the time, you know, sometimes a really good spouse can overcome a brief, and a lot of times, not sometimes, a lot of times, a really good spouse will overcome a brief sort of dip in the loving embrace that they give the other spouse, but it can't last forever. You know, if you are not holding tightly onto your spouse, eventually your spouse will drift away, and then that relationship will go.
Takes a lot of patience.
It takes a lot of patience, but it takes an effort. I mean, you have to physically hold on to that person. That has to be part of your plan. Police are investigating the deaths of 4 people in South Anchorage. I'm waiting for some additional information to come in, and a little bit more is coming in. This is on 74th Avenue between Nathan Drive and Michelin Place. One part of a fourplex, and police are in the midst of investigating it and trying to find out what went on there. 4 people dead, suspicious circumstances. That's not good news. You're listening to the Glen Biegel Show. 12 minutes after the hour. Love to hear from you. 569-1080, 357-5868. 15 minutes after the hour, Glen Biegel here on KOAN and KVNT. Boy, I'm really stirring up the left here. I gave them a little too much truth. There's a story out there in the Alaska Dispatch News. Legislative recess officially ends with no budget and a talk of a shutdown. I'm going to cover that here after I tell you about Dr. Dan Kiley. LakeOtisDental.com is where you can find him. 562-9209, a wonderful staff, and he wants one thing for you, and that is for you to keep your teeth healthy for a lifetime, or if you need reconstructive work, if things have gotten a little out of control, as they oftentimes do for people, whether they try and take care of their teeth or they haven't for several years. He can fix all of that. 562-9209, the one person everyone needs in their life, a conservative dentist. Yes, it's true. All right, so I'm having a bit of a difficulty here in that the title of this story is not true. There's only one problem with the story's headline. The legislature did pass a budget. It is on the governor's desk. He needs to sign it, veto it, or allow it to become law without a signature. Again, the literal title of this story is Legislative Recess Officially Ends with No Budget. Okay, they passed the budget. I don't know whether people care about the truth or doesn't. Now, here's Carl. A budget that is not fully funded is not a budget. Try to wrap your head around that fact. I come back. I said wrong. The budget is funded depending on oil price, cost of services, and all number of things. When or if the money does not match expenditures, the Democrats will need to determine if they want to shut the government down, whether the Republicans will spend from the earnings reserve, or whether they can get the 3/4 vote from the constitutional budget reserve. Tell me if I've said anything incorrect, right? All the things I said are all facts. Tell me if the title of this story is accurate or wrong. Gee, a little bit of deafening. Somebody else said that it's only a 2/3 vote. No, it's a 3/4 vote to get money out of the Constitutional Budget Reserve. So here Art comes in, and Art is a top commenter, and he helped run the government. He actually gives the real constitutional requirement. There isn't even a requirement that they pass a budget. There is only a requirement that any budget must be passed by the legislature, and they have it. The legislature has every right to just adjourn, go home, and let things happen as they may on July 1st or earlier if those functions have overspent and need supplemental. He's absolutely right. This is the reality of the situation, and for Kate, for Carl, for Barbara, for Sue, you guys do not understand this, and I know you don't like it. And for Pat Forgy, who wrote this farce of a story, this is a false story. It's not true. The story's not true, and the reason Pat Forgy is expending his credibility on this story is very important for people to realize. Why would a newspaper reporter put a falsehood in the title of his story when a budget is actually on the governor's desk, waiting for veto or waiting to be passed? Why would a reporter knowingly put a false title in a story? Because this is the big leagues, folks. This is not just an also-ran. This is not it doesn't really matter whether or not we win this battle or we don't. The left knows of which they speak. They know what they're fighting for. If they lose this battle over whether or not the legislature has passed a budget, they have. Art Chance, who is actually he headed up one of the departments. He has clarified for everyone on this thread, and that includes all of you leftists who said that I was not telling the truth when I said that they had passed a budget and they don't have to fully fund the budget based on whatever the estimates are. They do have to keep funding the budget and coming back in order to do supplementals if they do run out of money or when they run out of money. But you don't know whether or not a budget is fully funded. How could you possibly know that? Can somebody tell me for an absolute fact that oil won't go up to $130 a barrel? No, honestly, I'm serious about that. Can anyone out there, honestly, could they have told me that oil was going to go down to $45 a barrel? No way. There's no way. So here's the reality of the situation. They did what they were constitutionally required to do. The budget that was passed by the legislature. That's what the Constitution says. That's what Art Chance clarified, and that is the reality of the situation, and this title is wrong. Why would a reporter, why would a reporter put their credibility on the line for such a nothing burger? I mean, who cares whether or not the budget or they didn't pass a budget or whose fault it is? It's critical for them. And now they're in it, by the way. This storyline is going to be repeated from here to the end of time. They have passed the budget. They have passed the budget. They passed the budget. They passed the budget. They passed the budget. They passed the budget. Pat Forgy, I know you don't care. I know you're fighting for your life, by the way, your left-wing life. Because if they did pass the budget, now it's up to the governor to veto the budget. Fine. Go ahead. Veto the budget. You have every right to veto the budget. You're the governor. That's your job. Their job is done. They passed the budget. Is it fully funded to the level at which we know we won't have to spend money? Well, what if oil goes down to $15 a barrel? Well, no, then it'll never be funded to the point at which we don't know that we have to go out and borrow more money or take it from one of the reserve funds. They're playing politics. And the Democrats and the left and the Alaska Dispatch News and all these other news organizations know exactly what this is about, and you don't. And that's the problem. Conservatives have no idea what this battle's about. What does it matter whether or not they passed the budget or didn't pass a budget? Because it establishes who's trying to hold up the process. It establishes who's trying to spend more money. Here's the one thing Republicans know. If you go out and ask the people of the state of Alaska, do you want the government to spend as much money as it can this year, more than $3.2 billion in deficit? Do you think the Democrats are right to ask for another 100, as the governor wants, or 150 as the Democrats in the House want? $150 million in deficit spending? The vast majority of Alaskans, or at least a majority of Alaskans, will say no. We do not want the Democrats to win this budget battle. It's critical for the papers to make sure that conservatives don't know what they're arguing about. And if they can obfuscate, right, if they can confuse us by saying, well, there's no budget to even argue about, why are you conservatives arguing? Which is what all these Kates and Sues and all these other people are telling me. No, they didn't pass a budget. Why would they care? Because, well, these guys, I don't think actually know that this is about politics. I know what it's about, though. And I'm telling you. And so now we all know. Now we all know that we have a big fight on our hands. We're waiting for some more information about this police investigation. The deaths of 4 people in South Anchorage, 1 residence, the 500 block of East 74th Avenue. And we don't have a lot of details on that, but we're waiting for some more. So Alaska ranks near the bottom of high school graduation rates. Alaska has one of the country's lowest graduation rates, 71.8%. Now, a lot of the people who come out of high school still can't read at a 12th grade level. You know that a vast majority of the people who aren't graduating are not going to be able to read. How are you going to employ those people? I mean, could they even work for McDonald's? Could they even work for Burger King? Do you think that a McDonald's or a Burger King can hire somebody who can't read? I doubt it. I don't think so. It's too much of a risk. So Alaska's got more trouble ahead of it just because of our education system. And I don't think that it's necessarily just the education system. I mean, it's a weak culture. This report came out as well. Alaska population down after 26 years of growth. Now, we're a very young population. Do you know, Brian, by the way, that what number of youngest population in the country we are?
Alaska?
Yeah. Well, are we like the youngest? Are we the second youngest? Are we the 5th youngest? Are we the 10th youngest? Are we the 25th?
I'd say 40th.
We are the second youngest state.
Wow.
In the country. In other words, the average age of the citizen in Alaska is the second youngest of all across the entire country, which means what? When you have a young population, most of the time young people are having more young people. That's the kind of the way that things work. Once you get to be about 50 years old, the number of children that you have sort of drops off precipitously. Now, we don't have a lot of older people here because Alaska is not a very friendly place, being a winter climate, to have old people retire. So we do have some. I mean, I'm not saying we don't have any, but we have about the lowest number of elderly, and we have one of the greatest number of young people. So the result is we have the second youngest population. So what's significant about dropping 61 people? We dropped just 61. Basically, we were even, except for the fact that we would normally expect from a population of this age a growth between 2 and 3% per year. So we would normally have somewhere around 22,000 people more every year, plus however many people come up for the benefits or for the dividend or for, whatever it is, whatever we're handing out, whatever the welfare of the day is, I guess, Medicaid. We lost 61, which really means we lost 22,061. There are 22,061 people who we would have expected to be here in Alaska and are not here. So this is the out-migration. This is the start of the process where Alaska is trying to figure out who are we going to favor. You know who the people who probably have moved out? Oil companies. That's a tough. I walk up and down some of the places where people from the oil companies have their houses, and a lot of them are for sale. So I imagine some of them are moving out. Low oil prices is really tough to overcome. But I also think that some of the people in lower classes, some of the welfare benefit people, are thinking, you know what? I bet there's greener pastures down south. At least it'll be warm if I'm down there. But that's a fairly significant number. Are we going to have somebody on from Department of Labor to sort of walk us through?
Yeah, tomorrow we are going to have Eddie Hunsinger on, and he was really excited to come and tell us all about it.
Well, I think it'll be great because this has a lot to do with what goes on in Alaska. How many jobs there are going to be, what our unemployment rate is going to be affected by this, what your house price is going to be, how many new houses we need to build, whether we need a Kinnick Arm Bridge. This impacts any number of things. And so we'll find out more about that tomorrow. Talk about the crime story in Anchorage. And also Lynn Curry Swan has come out with an article here, which I just, sometimes she writes some of the most interesting things. She talks about a temper tantrum, a lonely watchdog, and a kind of a bad mouth on one of the employees. Some of these people ask the funniest questions, and I want to cover them here in the program. Love to hear from you as well. Who do you think is going to win the battle? This is really the question, of course, for our generation. Who's going to win the budget battle this year? Are the Republicans playing it smart? Will the average conservative go out and start letting the Democrats know that, yes, they did pass a budget, and no, you can't say that they didn't pass a budget, but that's just false. So please get your head wrapped around this. Anyway, Art Chance, a great commenter and a great person to help lead this fight. I'm glad he's out there on the net, but we all have to do our part. So if you ever see anybody say that the Republicans did not pass a budget, that is not true. It literally, specifically, and is entirely not true. That is not true. They did pass a budget. It's on the governor's desk. 28 minutes after the hour, Glen Biegel Show here. Stay tuned. 25 minutes before the hour, Glen Biegel Show here on KOAN and KVNT. If you're looking for somebody to help you plan your responsibilities for today, also known as insurance, and for your financial success for tomorrow, we call that retirement. Success in this life and the next. Not your afterlife, your retired life and your working life. Country Financial is there for you. AM Best confirms that they have the financial strength to protect your auto, your home, your life with an A-plus superior rating and 13 local locations, local people to help you plan out your life. Insurance, investments, all you got to do, go onto their website, countryfinancial.com, or you can call them at 866-COUNTRY, and Mike Daniels and his team will take care of you. Country is spelled Country. Are we going to find something from Bonnie? We should just play that regularly in order to comfort ourselves. We miss Bonnie. That is that's the truth of it. So we're in the midst of discussing a whole raft of different things, and there's lots of misinformation that's going on. And part of what talk radio is, unfortunately, we do our best to get the best information out there, but a lot of times we have to correct other people who should have good information, like Pat Forgy, who's with the press and is giving out bad information, like he says the legislature didn't pass a budget. Now, one of the things that's in Mike Dingman's article, in which there are several, is that there is a dismantling of the police department. Well, this is something that was repeated sort of ad nauseum throughout the campaign here recently. And so I wanted to have Mayor Dan Sullivan on to talk about the crime report that came out. Chief Mew addressed some of the things, but I wanted to get your take on, I guess, the perception that people have that crime is is sort of running out of control, that our police force is down and declining, and that it's being dismantled. So I'm glad you came on to kind of set the record straight.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. Yeah, that's clearly just not true. We saw a decline in the number of officers on the force, mainly because the cost of officers grew so exponentially, and when you've got tight budget times, you've got to use a measured and strategic approach to grow the force back up. So once we got the city's financial health back in order, we were able to start having police academies. We had 2 in 13, 2 in 14, 2 scheduled for this year. So you got to wait until you can actually afford putting people on your personnel. If you look at the department budget, from 2003 to 2013, it went from 45 million to 95 million, like 110% increase in a decade during a period of time when inflation was probably about 27%. So nobody can say that money has not been put into the police department. But unfortunately, when you make the cost of each individual so expensive, you can't have quite as many as you would like. But we didn't disband gang units or drug units or sexual assault units. In fact, the chief spoke at the Chamber of Commerce on Monday, and his slideshow was myth number 1, myth number 2, myth number 3, and had the facts to back all that up. So,
well, let's talk about some of the specifics.
The dismantling of the police department is complete mythology by Mr. Dingman.
Well, and that the problem is that these things have an impact. And I look, people will know this. You were my favorite mayor. Of course, that's not hard to figure out. You and I match up on a lot of things, but I just think you've done an amazing job of running the city in difficult circumstances. When you were handed from Mayor Begich just an outrageous situation where he planned on increasing the budget dramatically. He'd spent down all of the savings that we had. We were in desperate budgetary times because of the 2008 stock market crash and currency problems. I mean, there were just an enormous number of things, and you were handed all this trouble, and you seem to have drawn together a team and then made the best of it, which actually, as far as I'm concerned and the city of Anchorage is concerned, it seems to me like you did pretty well. You got reelected pretty broad majority. Yeah,
a real good team of people dedicated to fixing problems. And let's face it, the budget was a big challenge. You've got to make immediate decisions, because if you don't make reductions immediately that carry over year after year, then you're basically facing the same problem year after year. In fact, it'll continue to grow. So it took some tough decisions, and it meant that we had to say no to people, which is something that people need to hear now and then. But I look at the overall record. Dingman's article was somehow my legacy is tainted, and all he could really focus on was AO-37, and then, that stupid comment about dismantling the police department. He's written about 3 articles now, almost the exact same article about AO-37, again, repeating these urban myths like it was drafted in secret. Bills aren't drafted out at some public drafting table. Dick Cheney doesn't come to me and say, hey, help me draft this bill. You draft it with your attorney, with your executive staff, and then when it's introduced, it becomes a public document, and it had a huge public process. So,
yeah, I don't remember Mayor Biegel consulting me on whether or not he was consulting the union bosses, but he wasn't consulting the public until he brought his 5-year contracts out into public at the end of 2008. So
right, and they were brought out in draft format. They were barely hot off the press. There was very little time to analyze them. Even assembly members said they hadn't read them, didn't know the economic terms of them. And so the unions and people like Dingman, they have no complaint. They've never said anything about that way that was rushed and the lack of public process. Meanwhile, ours had 5 work sessions, 20 hours of public testimony. Those contracts didn't have anywhere near that kind of public process. So it's really one-sided. It's unfortunately unfair, but I've come to expect no less from Mr. Dingman. In fact, I responded to his column when they have, the ADN Facebook, and pointed out things like, let's see, we fixed the fiscal health of the city. We led the charge on the energy renaissance in Cook Inlet. Energy security is kind of a big deal. Crime is down. We've invested more in our infrastructure than any time in Anchorage history. And we had a world-class education summit pointing out our lack of student performance, just on and on. I mean, my legacy, I'm going to be really proud as I leave office, and certainly Mike Dingman is not writing my legacy story.
Well, good. And I'm glad that you are sort of taking these kinds of things on, because I want the record corrected. I don't like just leaving these things out there, particularly when they're really pot shots, like who wrote AO-37 and how it was drafted. There is no case under which people draft legislation out in public. And I explained why is because, look, if you were trying to draft something and say, okay, well, here's 10 things we might put in here, and you say, hey, union, which of these don't you like? Why don't you get all your members ginned up, so that you can start fighting the process, but then you yourself eliminate 5 of them before you even get to that point.
Well, bottom line, it just doesn't work that way. Yeah. It's either disingenuous or naive by Mr. Dingman to even suggest it works that way. Did we hire an attorney to help us draft it? We sure did. We hire attorneys all the time to help us, either because they've got specialties in representing us in court or specialties in helping us draft legislation. So that's not unusual either. But he's gone over to the far side, and he just, again, of course, he's a public union employee.
That's right.
So I think he's definitely got a bias there, and I think the bias shows through pretty glaringly.
All right. Well, give me a couple of points about AO-37 so that when people are trying to walk through this, and I think there were 4 or 5 points which are really sort of the centerpieces of AO-37 and its guidance. The purpose of it was guidance to the mayor and limitations on the mayor so that they couldn't give things that were too generous. But what were some of the most important things of it?
Well, and just on that note, we've just finished negotiating our 9th and final contract, and the tenets of AO-37 are virtually contained in all of them, not entirely, but most of them. No more than 3-year contracts. The economic costs cannot exceed the CPI plus 1%, and that means the total cost. We've got them paying more of their health care premiums. We got away from performance incentive pay, where there was plenty of incentive and very little performance. We got rid of contracts where you got paid $2,300 a month for your health care plan, but since your health care only cost $1,800, you got to pocket the $500 into your wallet. Unheard of. And those are kind of the main ones.
Well, I don't, and here's my guess is most people don't know them. They couldn't recite them. And so this attack on AO-37 becomes they won, so it must have been bad, but we don't really know why, and we don't know why it was good. And that kind of discussion always bothers me, because just because the union spent $1 million and the conservatives only spent $40,000 or $50,000, where outspent basically 20-1, that doesn't mean that this was a bad bill or that it had bad impacts.
Yeah, and the thing is, I got to make presentations at most of the Rotary clubs, the Eagle River Chamber, the Anchorage Chamber, in my State of the City addresses, and I would point out just exactly what AO-37 did, and people would come up afterwards and go, "Well, that doesn't sound unreasonable at all. What's the big deal about it?" And so the big deal is about they like power. They've had power under the previous administration, and they don't like being told what to do. But there's nothing unreasonable in AO 37 at all. So once people understand it, they get it. But like you said, it's just difficult sometimes when the media certainly won't carry the salient points about it and show how it, basically just
have they ever printed the main points of it? I seem to recall one story a couple of years ago where somebody touched on a couple of three things, but of course it was embedded.
I had a compass piece, right after it passed, there was the hue and cry about it, and I had a nice compass piece that pointed out exactly what it did. I published it in the Daily News and the Chugaki River Star. Easiest stuff to digest. I mean, labor law and labor contracts aren't, real sexy in people's attention span. So,
that's the reality of the situation. We all live with that. We try to explain things that are complicated, but we have 3 second. Our attention span is about 3 seconds. Hey, Mayor, I appreciate you calling in. Thanks for giving us a little bit of a rebuttal here to the Dingman piece. Important to do that, I thought.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn.
All right, appreciate that. Hey, we're going to do Wing Wednesday. It's going on right now, and 569-1080-357-5868 will get you, if you are caller number 4, will get you a $20 gift certificate to Wings and Things on Arctic and 36th Avenue, the best wings on planet Earth. Oh, I promise that it's true. Get hots with extra sauce. Give us a call right now, 569-1080, 569-1080, and 357-5868. Wings and Things right now. $11 minutes before the hour. I hope you tune in to Tom Anderson. He comes on in the morning, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. He'll get your day started off on the right foot. I want to talk about Lynn Curry Swan. She writes in our paper about a temper tantrum, a lonely watchdog, and a mouth. So this guy says, I work 90 hours a week. Man, if you work 90 hours a week for too long, that will put you in a grave. Supposedly, our company's administrative staff supports those of us in the field as well as higher ups, but they don't. So here comes the complaint. This is the piece she put in on May 12th. It's kind of hilarious. I don't know. I like these things, Brian, because a lot of times the humanity will come out, but it speaks to something a little bit deeper. And there's an AP story that I think it refers to Americans becoming less Christian and more secular. And that's a Pew Research poll. Dramatic changes going on out there in the population of the United States right now. All right, so here's what happened. He comes in after a long day's work. He's working 90 hours a week. That is forever. And he asked the administrative assistant to help him do something. And she says this to him: "What you're looking for is on the server. But if you need the answer and don't have time yourself, I'll help you locate this tomorrow." Uh-oh. He had had enough. He blasted her, reminded her that tomorrow was Saturday, and that while he would be working, she wouldn't be, and that he did not have time, and he put that in capital letters and quotes, or he wouldn't be asking her. I used a few choice words. She told me off and then told the office manager that I'd been mean. And both of them went teary-eyed to the general superintendent. Oh, I'm sensing the women folk, by the way, are starting to team up on this dude who works 90 hours a week. So listen to this and then tell me what you think will happen. I am now ordered to pay for anger management training. So the dude himself has to pay for anger management training on his own and take it on his own in his off time. The dude's working 90 hours a week. Do you really think that he can take this in his off time and he has to pay for it? Is this okay or not? Can a company order me to use my own time for training? If you're an hourly employee, your company needs to pay you for your time. Can you imagine working 90 hours a week, by the way, and not being an hourly employee? Is that possible? Is it possible that
happened at my last job?
Sucker! Oh, they loved you. They loved you all day long.
Well, I'm a workaholic and I just want to get things right.
Okay. Now, there are actually people who are at the very tip top, but they're not the worker folks. These are office folks, the vice presidents of this or of that. And I've seen a lot of people, directors, vice presidents, work 60, 70, 80, not 90 hours. If you're working 90 hours a week, man, you are going to put yourself into a grave. So I have a difficult time, but he's got to be paid by the hour.
I would hope so. That's a lot of overtime.
See, now I'm thinking that the dude is working probably 12-hour days, 7 days a week, working 84 hours a week. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. That's my guess as to what's going on with this guy. And that the lady's probably working 40. She's working 5/8. But I bet he's paid by the hour. So they can't force him to take anger management training, but they could fire him. I don't know. I mean, I guess, but basically what she says is this: if you're an hourly employee, your company needs to pay you for your time. If you're exempt, you won't get extra pay. While I agree that you're only part of this problem, Ms. Snark's bad behavior doesn't justify yours. Well, welcome to real life.
Yep, grow up, everybody.
Now, here's what I think is wrong in this situation. He is much more important to this company than this supposed executive assistant, in my opinion.
Most likely.
And that he basically, while he shouldn't have told her off, he should have gone into the boss and said, "Excuse me, but you need to back me up because I'm putting the time in. I'm making wealth for this corporation. I'm the one who's important here, and I need assistance, and I need it right now."
Yeah, he's obviously dedicated.
Yeah, he's very dedicated to what he's doing. I mean, he's really putting his time in, and there's no question. So while I agree that he really does have a problem, so here's where she comes down. She thinks he ought to go to anger management because that'll help him in the long run. And it does sound like the guy gets a little bit short at the end of a week. But I can tell you, if you're working 90-hour weeks for any length of time, that is not going to turn out well. You are not going to be able to control yourself. You're not going to be able to, because you don't have any balance in your life, right? And you're going to end up treating other people like this. I mean, it's just a guarantee. The company basically needs to tell you you're not allowed to work more than 70, I would guess. So she says that he needs to go to anger management class. I don't know. That is such a hard thing. He should have felt like you shouldn't tell people off. If you have a problem with what somebody told you, you go to their boss. If they are the boss, then you're out of luck, and you either need to find another job or whatever. But if you're that dedicated to a company, there's got to be somebody around who's going to hire you.
Right. It's like getting mad at the clerk at the store, or at McDonald's because,
yes,
the guy in the back put pickles on the thing, not the guy that gave it to you at the counter. Okay.
All right. Do you remember what we said beast was an alternate word for?
Yes.
The other B word
Yep.
that you generally don't. So here is the question. I called a woman a fat beast using the other word. And was told that was sexual harassment. I don't think it's sexual harassment.
Depends on what you like.
No, honestly, that's not sexual harassment. That's just harassment. Why would it be sexual harassment?
What if the guy likes bigger
women?
Yeah.
And it actually was a pickup line.
Right.
Well, it turns out, Brian, that it wasn't a pickup line.
Oh, okay.
It was actually a horrifically awful thing to say to another person.
Yeah, I wonder how they found that out.
Okay, so here is what Lynn Curry Swan, we're going through some of the real life circumstances, things that people go through. And I'm tying it back to this AP story, by the way, Americans becoming less Christian and more secular. Okay, I just want you to know this is what's playing in the back of my mind as I'm reading through these stories. So this guy goes and calls some woman who works in his office a fat beast. And he was told that was sexual harassment. That is not sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is, I want sex from you in order for you to continue to work here, I want you to go on a date with me.
You're a hot beast.
Yeah, you're a hot beast. All right. So now she comes back and she doesn't correct the fact that this is not sexual harassment. Sexual harassment has to do with requiring sex for employment or sexual circumstances or situations, right? Making somebody uncomfortable because of their sexuality. And by the way, gay people can sexually harass straight people by making them uncomfortable for their sexuality. That's not what this is. This is just flat harassment, which is just as illegal. Or if not illegal, a company has the right to fire you for harassing other employees.
Yeah, that's a hostile work environment.
Yeah, exactly. It's a hostile work environment, which you don't want generally. You don't want people calling other people fat beasts. So anyway, she doesn't correct that, which I fault her for. But calling women names can be harassment if you do so regularly. I think if you call a person that one time, you're probably a little bit over the edge, and it's not going to be good for you. Further, while it's your opinion that she is fat or a beast, this is the fact that you're a name caller who needs to have his mouth put in check. Good advice there, Lynn Curry Swan. Hey, folks, happy Wednesday. Who won that? Yolanda did. Yolanda won the Wings and Things. Congratulations,
yep.
Yolanda. She's going to enjoy that. She'll be winging it at Wings and Things, corner of 36 and Arctic. God bless, folks. Have a great Wednesday.